I think confidence will always be a part of the journey. It's not something that's like finished and wrapped up nice like my math problems. It's one of those things that you'll constantly be building and rebuilding and losing, right? Because life is full of ups and downs. But I think my baseline confidence is pretty high. I continuously challenge myself.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Aiken and I manage career services at the Department of Management Science and Engineering at Stanford University. Welcome to MS&E Stories and Voices Graduating Student Profiles. It takes a lot of time and work to gain the confidence we need to actively pursue our passions in a smart and intentional way. Graduating bachelor student Isabella Battistoni, who goes by Belle, is an absolute personification of this. She's a key member of the rowing team here at Stanford, a stellar student, and an inspirational spokesperson for the importance of helping the women of the future stay in sports right now whilst they're girls. I'm delighted and excited to be talking with her today. Belle, thank you so much for joining me. Let's start off with a little bit about your journey to Stanford.
Well, first off, I'm super excited to be on this podcast and was super grateful when you asked me. I'm originally from Seattle. I was born and raised to two very loving and supportive parents who never really pushed me academically, but were really focused on making sure I was a well-rounded kid. So I started swimming when I was 7 years old. It was like my first love, you could say. I definitely, towards the end, didn't love it. I swam all the way through junior year of high school, and that's when I transitioned to rowing. My high school, Holy Names, had a rowing team, which was very unique to the Seattle area. And I continued to swim for the first 6 months while I was rowing and getting recruited for both. When I got the call from Stanford, that was kind of the indicator of, oh, maybe I should go with this whole rowing thing. I remember as a kid, we were like listening to the radio, ESPN. I was like, what's Stanford? And he was like, oh, it's an amazing school. If you ever get the chance to go, like, you should. So then when they called, it was, obviously I wasn't immediately like, yes, right? Because you got to play your cards right. But it was a sealed deal then.
Yeah, but your dad was so excited.
Oh yeah, he was big pushing for it.
So it was the Stanford class of 2024. You're that high school class of 2020, and you guys were the ones that lost your graduation, that started your university careers virtually rather than on campus here. What's been the impact of that?
I think I'm realizing the impact much more now than at first. I basically feel like I was a freshman as a sophomore, and that kind of put me back in terms of my progression through college. I felt very behind on like long-term career goals and knowledge, and didn't really have the relationship with upperclassmen or just experiencing this culture. The past year, it's taken a long time to figure things out and like where I want to go in my career once I transition away from sports. I also felt somewhat pigeonholed. It's not necessarily a bad thing because an athletics career is much shorter than my professional career will be. But in the same vein, it's made it harder to think about like, what do I want to be doing 5 to 10 years down the line? However, it's given me a lot of important life skills like time management, perseverance, leadership, communication is a big one. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from sports is like, I'm the one who gets things done because they have to be done given how limited time we have.
It is so interesting. I remember thinking during the pandemic when it came around actually to graduation, it was like, oh, so no Wacky Walk. Tradition not being paid forward. It was like, well, Wacky Walk disappeared because...
There's a lot of like small traditions that have either just diminished over time because the people who did them now are like 2 years removed or graduated.
Exactly.
And so people trying to bring them back don't know what it was like before COVID.
So you just lose that organic nature of some of these things.
Yeah. Well, there's even like tradition within athletics. Like when a new freshman class comes in, it's kind of like you give them the culture of the team, right? But then when we weren't on campus, luckily the rowing team my freshman year got to come on campus in February of 2021. But even then, a lot of the older girls didn't come back because they either took gap years or they just decided they were done with rowing. And so like the team was definitely more fragmented and less cohesive. And it is super interesting to think about how like the small little interactions make a culture what it is.
Yes, very much so. And just the little traditions, the little rituals,
Yes,
all of
yeah.
that sort of thing
Yeah.
that can disappear very easily. But then it's also, I guess the flip side of that could be that you guys got the chance to maybe start some new traditions
Right.
as well.
Yes, yep. I would say that the culture of the rowing team has been amazing these past few years. It's much closer than it used to be.
Mm,
And I think that is a product of COVID and also somewhat of the girls on the team because within COVID, like when we were on campus, only had each other. Like
Yes.
we weren't technically allowed to sit with other teams or sit with other athletes. And then there were other people on campus, but they were like OAE and you weren't supposed to interact with them and COVID testing every week. So definitely stunted in that aspect of the college experience.
Well, it's this interesting split of like maybe you know fewer people, but you know them better.
Yeah, that's for sure. You spend a lot of time with the same people, and I think that's why the team is really close too. I mean, we do naturally spend a ton of time together.
So to pivot a little bit, what was it about MS&E that brought you to us?
I was drawn to MS&E because I'm a naturally like outgoing person and I'm pretty curious. And I felt like a lot of the people in MS&E were the same. I also liked that it was a broad focus in terms of its engineering with a people focus.
Yes.
And I think that I've always loved math because I love this idea of a right answer, like completion. It's very satisfying. Math is super satisfying. But then the real world is people problems. And those are not clear cut. Those are more nuanced. And I'm also super interested and sometimes frustrated by them. But that's what drew me to MS&E was this balance between engineering fundamentals, but then also the nuance of working with people and how do you make organizations effective.
It's the perfect blend. What I hear from a lot of companies as I talk to them and tell them about our students, that they love this balance, and the MS&E grads have got all of those technical skills, but then also with that great big picture overview of the broader vision.
Yeah, it's very well-rounded. Going back to childhood. Got to stay well-rounded.
For sure. You know, and that breadth of what we teach in the program, it's always really visible on a day that's one of my favorites of the year. And that's when you guys all give your senior presentations in winter quarter, because that's the day that we really get to see how all of this is applicable and what you're doing with it and what you're going to continue potentially with it as well. This culmination of everything. I'd love to hear more about your experience with that class and how you felt it pulled everything together for you.
Yeah, the senior project was a great learning experience. My team and I worked with Strong Girls United, and it was definitely fun on that last day that you mentioned to watch all the presentations. I, along with the whole audience, was like super impressed with the team that worked with FoodWise.
That one was a fun project.
Yeah. Fun fact, Jacob Fairman, who was on that team, was my marriage pact sophomore year. And then that team also included Nathan Lamb, who is the other MS&E senior spotlight. So,
which I had no idea about when I asked the peer review.
I know.
The stories just come up.
It just goes to show how small Stanford is.
It really is. And then for anyone who isn't aware, the Stanford Marriage Pact tradition that you're referencing there is just, it's another one of those really cool, quirky, only at Stanford type stories of being this thing, I think like for decades of, you know, that whole informal marriage pact of if we're not married by whatever age, then we'll marry each other. Then it got formalized.
Yeah, with an algorithm.
In 2017, an economics class that Paul Milgram, who of course has since won the Nobel Prize for economics, a project in his classroom where the students were developing that survey and the algorithm to go with it on this, you know, it's essentially a market design problem. And so, now it's formalized. It's a company that one of those two students is heading up, and it's at multiple universities. It's a great success story.
It's hysterical, and it's also funny to see how excited campus gets in like November when the marriage pact goes out. Everyone's like, did you fill it out? It's a super quirky but fun tradition.
For sure. And then, so pardon the pun here then, but, you know, this ability for you in senior project to marry this athletics background that you have with your academic pursuits in the project that you choose. Was that one of the reasons that your senior project had the focus that it did? As the mom of an 11-year-old daughter, I was so fascinated.
We were drawn to work with Strong Girls United because the project focused on how to keep young girls in sports. It's really important because research shows that girls' involvement in sports leads to higher levels of family satisfaction, better leadership skills, and stronger self-images. That's why 90% of female CEOs report having played a sport in their life. And interestingly, 56% report doing so at the college level. The interesting part, though, is yet by age 14, girls drop out of sports 2 times the rate of boys.
Those figures, I remember watching the presentation and it just blowing me away.
So it's clear that sports are huge factors in a girl's development, but they're dropping out much quicker than boys. And so that's what Strong Girls United focuses on, is keeping girls in sports.
Yeah. When it comes to sport and your personal development, what's that story?
Athletics in general have taught me a lot about leadership, and specifically that we all have our own superpowers. For those of you that don't know, rowing is definitely, it's advantageous to be taller and stronger. And I'm above average height, but for a rower, I'm short. So then when I approached rowing, I thought a lot about like, okay, maybe I'm not naturally the tallest or the strongest, but what can I do better that others aren't doing? Or like, what's my niche? So I figured out my niche, which is technique, attention to details, and then also composure and teamwork. I've really been fascinated with trying to figure out like what makes different boats faster. We call it free speed in rowing, but I believe that like if you're more bonded as a boat or like you're more cohesive as a group, you will just go faster. And it was funny, while I was taking some of my MS&E courses, like 180, I was learning about different personality types and different working motivations. And then I'd go to rowing practice and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this person is like this. This is how I'm going to approach this person. And I think like now, and if you ask my coach, like I've definitely gotten better at it. And he says I've matured, but I'm like, maybe I just took MS&E. Like MS&E is my major. I don't know if it's maturing.
MS&E matured you.
Right. But like now I can like we even talked about like reading body language, right? And we'd like watch these videos. So now like I'll read my teammates' body language and I'll know when to keep saying maybe something to work on and when to like just say something positive.
Yeah.
And kind of reading like what the team is needing and when to speak and when not to speak. That's been really, really intriguing.
It's like one of those hard-won lessons that sounds really obvious in hindsight.
Yeah, it's been really frustrating and fun at the same time to figure it all out. I'm a super, super passionate rower. And so like kind of learning how to manage myself too in a team environment and then also like help others reach their potential has been super, super engaging. And there has always been this kind of feeling of imposter syndrome. And I know it's like very, very typical of Stanford, but we're all the same at the end of the day. This idea that we don't belong, like everyone kind of feels like it.
For sure. It's one of the things that we hear the most from students and across the board.
And I think once you accept it, like it's much smaller than it is. I remember when I was getting recruited, like this idea that I always wanted to be the best almost held me back from coming to Stanford. I was getting recruited to less competitive schools and their rowing teams were less competitive. And so I would have been the best rower on the team. And while that was like exciting and maybe some false confidence, I knew that I wanted to be surrounded by people who were better than me because that only elevates me versus the other way around. Like I wouldn't have been as challenged as I am here at Stanford. And I'm big into like challenging yourself and rising to the occasion because that repeated many, many times builds confidence. And that's why like sports teaches such important fundamental skills.
So the resiliency just builds, the confidence just builds so many of these really important attributes that a person can have. And you can see how this does correlate with what you said earlier, that you're behind on your career education, but you've got these sort of more broadly universal and applicable skills that you can apply into your career that will help you as you go forward.
Yeah, I think sports have given me a ton of confidence. And I think that approaching both my academics and then career, it's also given me confidence to be honest about my story, about how like I felt behind in it. And I believe that confidence is also contagious, the fake it till you make it trope, but it does work because it's like just wiring in your head. You got to keep telling yourself, like, it's not being like blindly positive, but it is reinforcing that like you're ready, you're gonna do great. Like it's not about what if everything goes wrong, it's what if everything goes great.
Yeah, that reframing in so many different ways, reframing can make a huge difference. I mean, your confidence totally shines through. It was one of the first things I actually noticed about you in your project. Even before you started talking, just like the way that you carried yourself. But confidence is one of those things that it can't ever just be given. And most of us don't have it naturally. It's something that we do gradually gain over time from things like sport, from things like coming through challenging conversations and situations. and coming through it well and having learned things and knowing that we can do it and come out of the other side. I'm going to guess there was more than just that brought you to where you are now. So how long has it taken?
I think confidence will always be a part of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's like finished and wrapped up nice like my math problems. It's one of those things that you'll constantly be building and rebuilding and losing, right? Because life is full of ups and downs. But I think my baseline confidence is pretty high. I continuously challenge myself because you have to prove to yourself that you can do it to continue to build confidence. And then my mom has also been a huge inspiration when it comes to confidence. I'm very fortunate to have a very boss lady for a mother. And she will always talk to me about like when I do go into the workforce, how to advocate for myself, how to negotiate. These are things that you need to stand up for yourself in. And I think confidence in general, like helps you ask the hard questions, helps you have the uncomfortable conversations. I'm a huge believer in if you have like a complaint or something, or if you are putting off an uncomfortable conversation, you're prolonging the amount of time you're uneasy to put it off in the future versus if you just had the hard conversation now or voiced your opinion now or negotiated something now, you could move on with your life. And so it's like being uncomfortable in the short term pays off in the long term because then you're number one, more informed, but also then you're like reinforcing this idea that you can have the hard conversations, you can hold your own, and you can advocate for yourself.
I think so much of this comes down to like the intentionality of it and the importance of the role model. You talked about how in your freshman year you kind of missed that having the older girls to look up to. And as we think about our younger girls in sport right now with these great coaches, like you said, of showing up for yourself and for others, but with the intentionality of messaging and of behavior.
Yeah, and I think mentorship has been a huge role in my like second half of college. I also think that having a mentor who believes in you, maybe even more than yourself, is so pivotal to your success. And having someone like believe in you, that's also so important to your own confidence. And so now with like my freshman, I try to like when there's a girl who's just absolutely killing it to authentically let her know. It's like important to like let the younger people know that like I know you're still adjusting and you're adapting, but like trust yourself to adapt because you are going to go far. And that's like the same with my mom. My mom believes in me like more than anyone, right? And like for her being my role model growing up, that's also played a huge role in my confidence.
Moms are the best.
Yeah, they are. I love you, Mom.
Okay, so this awareness that you've got of the importance of confidence and mentoring other people and just your love that you talked about earlier of the people issues as well as sort of the engineering skills and the people problems and how to motivate people. These are just great mindsets, awareness to be taken with you into a future career. What is it that you're going to be doing? Are you going to be getting the chance to use all of this?
Yes, I'm so excited. Post-graduation, I'll be moving up to SF and working in Berkeley at the Valeon Group. It's a quantitative hedge fund, and I'll be working on the operations and finance team as an operations associate. I'll be working with different teams throughout the company, which I'm really excited about because I want exposure to different areas of a business, especially given that I don't have as much internship experience. And so I was super excited about this job because number one, the people, when I spoke to them, were amazing. And that was like a big thing, like taking the people aspect of MS&E. They were asking really thoughtful and telling questions that like really excited me about the opportunity. And then also just exposure to different areas of a business. I'm going to learn a lot of different skills and kind of figure out like, what am I good at? What's my niche? What are the details that I can excel at? And what is like super motivating to me? I have made a goal for myself when I get there to identify a mentor and like have a clear mentor, like that they know that they're my mentor. Like I want someone who's further along in their career that I can ask like questions about, and maybe they're dumb questions or maybe they're hard questions, but someone where I can ask them about their experience, what they wish they had known when they were like just starting out.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been super fun, so enlightening. You're really thoughtful about all of these issues. Before we go, though, I do want to wrap up with my kind of final 3 questions. And the first one is, what is your advice for someone coming into the program that they might not have heard from somewhere else?
Find a mentor who's either a junior or senior and talk to them about their experience in MS&E, because now they've been through it. So you can learn some of the lessons that they've learned, maybe without you having to learn them yourself. But then also, while you're going to be a junior or senior, they've graduated now and they will be entering the workforce. You can talk to them about the transition. You can talk to them about their jobs. You can talk to them about what they're doing. That is super powerful because it helps inform how you want to use MS&E and where you want to go with it. And then my second piece of advice would be read Lindsay's emails, the newsletters she sends out, because those are littered with super good like tidbits or advice, or you have a lot of events. Yeah, you have a lot of events going on. Go to those events as well. There's a lot of guest speakers. There's headshots. Like there's so much where as Stanford students, we get a lot of emails. Like I totally understand, but these are always ones I flag. I always flag these because there's so much also like sometimes they'll have advice about like interviews or internships. Okay, my internship is over. What now should I do? Like those are so helpful. Like you write like a thank you. Those emails are so valuable. Like if you can't find a mentor, at least read those, you know?
And then what is your life mantra?
I stole this from Matthew McConaughey, don't leave crumbs. And basically this saying is, don't make decisions today that cause you to turn and look back over your shoulder tomorrow. Something that can apply to like large decisions, but also small things. Like sometimes when I'm thinking about like homework, I'm like, wow, like if I don't do it tonight, I have to do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I don't have time tomorrow. But it can also be like going back to the hard conversations. If you don't have the hard conversation today, you're just delaying it till tomorrow. And I think that don't leave crumbs like requires you to stay true to your values and get clear on your values. And I think like navigating life that way, it would be hard to be led astray.
And then 2 books and a podcast.
Yes.
Too, of, a book that is MS&E or MS&E adjacent, another one that's kind of standalone just for fun, and then a podcast that you find inspirational.
My first book would be Wooden by John Wooden. For those of you that don't know, John Wooden is the legendary UCLA men's basketball coach, and his autobiography talks a lot about his upbringing, but then related to MS&E, how to build a cohesive, effective team. And then just one more life one is The Defining Decade. This is one of my recent reads by Meg Jay. It is tailored to 20-something-year-olds, she coins it. And it's basically why 20 is not the new 30. And I'm 21 right now. Reading it now, it's basically talks about how to be intentional in your 20s and how to be intentional about the decisions you're making, where you want to go in your career. Honestly, everyone should read it. It's been super great. And then my podcast, I really enjoy Smartless with Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes. It's not very self-helpy. It's more of like a comedy. One of them brings on a guest star, and then the other 2 don't know who it is. And then during the podcast, they have like an authentic conversation. They just talk about that guest star's experience, journey, or wherever the conversation goes. So they're really funny.
Well, thank you again so much for being here with us today. I'm going to wish you huge success in your career, which I'm sure is going to
I'm excited.
Skyrocket.
This has been so fun.
Award update. I'm thrilled to report that after we recorded this episode, Belle was recognized with the Pac-12 Student Athlete of the Year Award for women's rowing. In addition to that, she and the rest of the Strong Girls United team were the runners-up in the MS&E Senior Project Award, which is announced at our annual commencement ceremony. Our congratulations to Belle. Both were very well deserved, and we're so proud of you. Thank you for listening to this episode of MS&E Stories and Voices, Graduating Student Profiles. This episode was produced and edited by me, Lindsay Aiken, with editing support from Jim Fabry. Our music was composed and performed by Catherine Barron, MS&E Masters Class of 2023. Please be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify or whichever platform you're listening on. And check out our website at msne.stanford.edu. That's msande.stanford.edu. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.